I knew I was making a grave mistake the moment the carriage passed through the wrought iron gates of Ravenscroft Manor, the mist curling around the wheels like ghostly fingers attempting to pull me back. 10 years had passed since I had sworn never to return to this place, never again to look upon the face of the Duke of Thornfield, yet here I was, drawn back by a letter that had traveled across continents to find me. The letter had arrived on a Tuesday, a perfectly ordinary day in my quiet life as a companion to an elderly widow in Florence. The handwriting on the envelope had stolen my breath. Elegant, severe, unmistakably his. Inside, just 5 words. Eleanor, I need you. Please come. No signature was necessary. In the decades since our parting, I had tried desperately to forget him, to forget the whispers of the curse that had driven him to send me away. But those 5 words had unraveled all my careful forgetting. The carriage lurched over the rough drive, and through the window I could see Ravenscroft emerging from the mist, like a slumbering beast. The grey stone mansion stood severe against the darkening sky, its many windows like watchful eyes. I had once loved this place, before I understood what secrets it held, before I knew of the curse that haunted the Thornfield men. The curse that had taken the Duke's mother, grandmother, and every duchess before them within a year of their weddings. The curse he feared would claim me too. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, was waiting on the steps as the carriage pulled to a stop. Her face, more lined than I remembered, betrayed nothing as she greeted me. "Lady Eleanor," she said with a slight curtsy, "His Grace is expecting you in the library." I stepped down from the carriage, my traveling dress suddenly feeling too thin against the notorious Ravenscroft chill. "Has he changed much, Mrs. Winters?" I asked, unable to stop myself. The old woman's eyes softened momentarily. "We all change, my lady. But some things—" She stopped herself, then simply said, "It's not my place to say." The great house was just as I remembered, imposing, beautiful, haunted by history. The portraits of Thornfield ancestors lined the main hall, their eyes seeming to follow me as I walked. I had always felt they disapproved of me, the daughter of a mere baronet, not grand enough for their precious bloodline. If only that had been the only obstacle. I paused before the library door, my hand trembling slightly as I adjusted my hat. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times on the journey from Italy, imagined myself cool and distant, showing him that his rejection had not broken me. Yet standing there, I felt all my practiced composure crumbling away. I knocked. "Enter." His voice, deeper than I remembered, sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the manor's perpetual cold. The library was dimly lit, the heavy curtains drawn against the approaching twilight. A fire burned in the grate, casting long shadows across the room. And there he stood by the mantelpiece, his back to me, still tall and broad-shouldered but somehow diminished. When he turned, I had to stifle a gasp. The Duke of Thornfield had aged far beyond his 37 years. His once coal-black hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and lines of worry had etched themselves around his eyes and mouth. But those eyes, dark as midnight, intense as ever, fixed on me with such hunger that I took an involuntary step back. "Eleanor," he said, my name a prayer on his lips. "You came." I lifted my chin. "Your letter left little room for refusal, Your Grace." A shadow of pain crossed his face at my formality. "After all this time, you still address me so?" How should I address the man who once told me he would rather see me dead than married to him? The words escaped before I could stop them, harsh and raw with the pain I had carried for a decade. He flinched as if I had struck him. I deserved that. I deserve far worse. He moved toward me, then stopped, seeming to think better of it. "But I would never have summoned you back into danger without dire cause." "Danger?" I echoed. "Then you still believe in it? The curse?" His jaw tightened. "I believe something stalks the Thornfield line, something that has taken every woman who has ever loved a Duke of Thornfield. My father called it a curse. I once thought the same. Now—" He trailed off, turning to pick up a leather-bound journal from his desk. 3 weeks ago, my groundskeeper found this buried in the old family crypt. I took the journal reluctantly, my fingers brushing his. Even that slight contact sent a jolt through me, a reminder of feelings I had fought to bury. The journal was ancient, its pages yellow and brittle. "It belonged to the first Duchess of Thornfield," he said quietly. "She did not die of the curse, Eleanor. She was murdered, and I believe every Thornfield bride since has met the same fate." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Murder? But that's impossible. I once thought so too. But there have been incidents in the village, deaths that mirror patterns described in that journal. And then there are the visions. Visions? My voice caught. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw genuine fear. "I have seen my mother, Eleanor, walking these halls at night, and she has spoken your name." A chill crept up my spine, but I forced myself to remain steady. "So you summoned me back to this place you once claimed would kill me, because you believe a ghost is asking for me?" "I summoned you because you were the only one who never feared the curse," he said, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "The only one who laughed when the servants whispered about the Thornfield doom. The only one with the courage to face whatever this truly is." He hesitated, then added, "And because despite everything I said, everything I did to drive you away, you are the only woman my heart has never forgotten." The admission hung in the air between us, dangerous and fragile. Before I could respond, a terrible scream echoed through the manor, high-pitched, terrified, and abruptly silenced. "What was that?" I gasped. The Duke's face had gone pale. "It came from the north wing, the wing that has been sealed since my mother died." As our eyes met in mutual horror, I knew with dreadful certainty that I had not been summoned to Ravenscroft merely to revisit the past. Something was awakening in this ancient house, something that knew my name and had been waiting for my return. The scream still echoed in my ears as the Duke and I raced through the long corridor toward the north wing. I hitched up my skirts, propriety forgotten in the urgency of the moment. It had been a woman's scream, of that I was certain. Yet the Duke had told me on our way up the grand staircase that only a skeleton staff maintained Ravenscroft now. Himself, Mrs. Winters, the groundskeeper Mr. Collins, and a maid called Jenny. "The north wing has been sealed since my mother's death," the Duke said, as we reached the heavy oak door that separated it from the rest of the house. A thick chain with a rusted lock barred our way. "No one should be in there." "Then how do you explain what we heard?" I asked, my breath coming quick. The Duke fumbled with a ring of keys he'd snatched from a drawer in the library, his hands uncharacteristically unsteady. I noticed a thin sheen of sweat on his brow despite the chill. "I cannot," he admitted, "but this is not the first unexplained sound from this wing in recent weeks." The lock finally gave way with a groan of protest, and the chain slithered to the floor like a metal serpent. He pushed open the door, which creaked ominously on hinges that had clearly not moved in years. The air that rushed out to meet us was stale and heavy with dust. The Duke raised the oil lamp he'd brought, its light revealing a long hallway shrouded in white sheets that draped the furniture like ghosts frozen in time. The wallpaper, once a vibrant burgundy pattern, had faded and peeled in places, exposing the lath beneath. Our footsteps echoed as we entered, the floorboards protesting beneath our weight. "Mother's rooms are at the end of the hall," the Duke said quietly, his voice tight. I could sense the cost of these words to him, the pain of memories long suppressed. We moved slowly down the corridor, the Duke slightly ahead with the lamp, casting our enormous shadows against the walls. Each door we passed was closed, the rooms behind them mysteries. I found myself drawn to a particular door on our right, my hand reaching for the knob almost of its own accord. "Not that one," the Duke said sharply, catching my wrist. His touch burned against my skin, an unwelcome reminder of what once was. "That was her studio. It remains exactly as she left it." I pulled my hand away, unsettled not by his words, but by the inexplicable urge I'd felt to enter that specific room. "You said you've seen your mother's ghost," I whispered. "Here, in this wing?" He nodded grimly. "Twice, standing at the end of this very hall, beckoning." I could not bring myself to follow. A chill that had nothing to do with the damp air crept up my spine. I had never been superstitious. Indeed, my dismissal of the Thornfield doom had been one of the qualities that first drew the Duke to me. But there was something in this forgotten wing that felt watchful, aware. I pulled my shawl tighter around my shoulders. "Eleanor." The Duke stopped abruptly, turning to me, the lamp casting dramatic shadows across his aristocratic features. "Perhaps you should return downstairs." "Whatever, whoever," screamed. "I can investigate alone." "I did not travel across Europe to be sent away at the first sign of unpleasantness," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Besides, you brought me here because you believed I could help. I cannot do so from the safety of the drawing room." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, that same half-smile that had once made my heart race. "You are as stubborn as ever." "And you are as overprotective," I countered, surprised at how easily we fell back into our old patterns of speech, as if the decade of silence between us had been merely days. The moment was shattered by the sound of breaking glass from the room at the end of the hall, the Duchess's bedchamber. We both started, then hurried forward. The door to the bedchamber stood slightly ajar, a faint bluish light spilling out into the hallway. The Duke pushed the door open fully, raising the lamp high. The bedchamber was vast, dominated by a massive four-poster bed still draped in faded blue velvet. A vanity table stood by the window, its mirror clouded with age. But it was the window itself that drew our attention. One of its panes was shattered, the night wind blowing the curtains in a spectral dance, and on the floor beneath lay a small object that gleamed in the lamplight. I moved toward it before the Duke could stop me, crouching to examine it. It was a locket, silver and intricately engraved with the Thornfield crest. "This is your mother's," I said, recognizing it from the portrait that hung in the main hall. I opened it carefully, revealing a miniature painting of a handsome man who was not the late Duke, a man with kind eyes and a scholar's face. "But who is this? Not your father, surely?" The Duke took the locket from me, his face draining of color as he looked at the miniature. "No, not my father." He snapped the locket shut. "This was buried with my mother. I watched it placed around her neck before the coffin was closed." The implications of his words hung heavy in the air between us. Someone had disturbed the Duchess's grave, or more impossible still, the Duchess herself had returned, leaving behind the evidence of her unearthly visitation. As if in answer to our unspoken thoughts, a low moan echoed through the room, not from the corridor behind us, but from the very walls around us. The temperature plummeted suddenly, my breath visible in front of me. The Duke's hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers intertwining with mine, as they had so many times before. "We are not alone," he whispered. The lamp in his other hand flickered, then extinguished completely, plunging us into darkness broken only by the faint moonlight through the broken window. I felt, rather than saw, a presence moving in the far corner of the room, a deeper shadow among shadows. The Duke's grip on my hand tightened painfully. "Mother?" he called, his voice thick with emotion. "Is it you?" No answer came, but the atmosphere in the room changed, the air growing so cold it hurt to breathe. I felt something brush past me, not a physical touch, but a disturbance in the air, carrying with it the faint scent of lilies. The flower I knew from the Duke's rare mentions had been his mother's favorite. "She wants to show us something," I murmured, certain of it without knowing why. "We must follow." The Duke hesitated only a moment before nodding. Still clutching my hand, he led me after the presence, back into the hallway, where a faint phosphorescent glow now hovered near the studio door that had drawn me earlier. As we approached, the door swung open of its own accord, revealing a room that time had left untouched. Canvases leaned against the walls, covered in sheets. An easel stood in the center, holding a half-finished painting also concealed by cloth. Brushes lay cleaned and organized on a table as if their owner had merely stepped out momentarily and would soon return to her work. The glow we had followed coalesced near the easel, illuminating it. With trembling hands, the Duke stepped forward and removed the sheet covering the unfinished painting. We both gasped at what was revealed, a portrait, nearly complete, of a woman with my exact features, dressed in a wedding gown, her face frozen in an expression of terror, her throat marked by livid bruises. Behind her loomed a shadowy male figure, his features indistinct, but his hands wrapped around the woman's neck. "Impossible," I breathed. "Your mother died 20 years ago. She never met me." The Duke stared at the painting, his face a mask of horror. "This is not my mother's work," he said hoarsely. She painted landscapes, never portraits. Someone has been in here. Someone has done this. But if not his mother's ghostly hand, whose? And how could they have painted my likeness so exactly? As these questions formed in my mind, I noticed something else. At the bottom of the canvas, written in what appeared to be dried blood rather than paint, a single name, Beatrice. "Who is Beatrice?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The Duke turned to me, his eyes wide with a realization that seemed to terrify him. "Beatrice," he whispered, "was the name of the first Duchess of Thornfield, the one whose journal I found, the one who was murdered." As the implications of his words sank in, the candles that lined the studio suddenly ignited of their own accord, their flames burning an unnatural blue. In their light, I saw the other paintings around the room more clearly, and my blood turned to ice. Each canvas depicted the same scene: a woman in a wedding gown, strangled, her face changing from painting to painting, but the shadowy male figure always the same. Dozens of them, a gallery of murdered brides spanning centuries. "Eleanor," the Duke said urgently, pulling me toward the door. "We must leave this place now." But as we turned to flee, the door slammed shut before us. On its surface, appearing as if written by an invisible hand, blood-red letters spelled out a message that stole what little courage I had left. "You will be next, Eleanor Blackwood." The room began to spin around me as terror overwhelmed my senses. The last thing I remembered was the Duke calling my name as darkness claimed me. I awakened to the sensation of being carried, strong arms cradling me against a broad chest. Through the fog of returning consciousness, I recognized the Duke's familiar scent, sandalwood and leather-bound books, and felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my cheek. For one disoriented moment, I allowed myself to remember a time when such closeness between us had been our expected future, not a moment of crisis. "She's awakening," came Mrs. Winters's voice, and I realized we had returned to the main part of the house. I opened my eyes fully to find myself in what I recognized as the Duke's study, a smaller and more intimate room than the grand library. The Duke was lowering me onto a chaise by the fire, his face etched with concern. "How long was I began, my voice raspy. "Only a few minutes," he answered, not moving away even after he had set me down. His hand lingered on my shoulder, as if reluctant to break contact. "You fainted in the studio." The memory of what we had seen there flooded back. The paintings of murdered brides, my own face among them, the blood-red warning on the door. I shuddered involuntarily, and the Duke's grip on my shoulder tightened in response. "Mrs. Winters has prepared a restorative," he said, finally stepping back as the housekeeper approached with a steaming cup. The old woman's face was grave as she handed it to me. I detected the scent of brandy among the tea and herbs. "Thank you," I murmured, taking a sip. The warm liquid burned pleasantly down my throat, bringing clarity back to my thoughts. When I looked up, the Duke was pacing before the fireplace, his tall figure outlined by the dancing flames. "I should never have brought you back to this place," he said, his voice thick with self-recrimination. "I've endangered you once again." "I came of my own free will," I reminded him, setting the cup aside. "And I will not be frightened away by theatrical threats, no matter how unsettling their delivery." The Duke turned to me, a flash of his old admiration briefly lighting his eyes. "Your courage always did both impress and terrify me, Eleanor." He paused, glancing at Mrs. Winters. "Leave us, please, and ensure that the north wing is secured again. No one is to enter without my express permission." Mrs. Winters nodded, but hesitated at the door. "Your Grace, shall I send for Dr. Barrett in the village? For Lady Eleanor's constitution, after such a shock?" "That won't be necessary," I interjected before the Duke could answer. "I am perfectly recovered, thank you." After the housekeeper departed, closing the door softly behind her, the Duke retrieved a small wooden box from his desk and brought it to me. "I found this hidden beneath a floorboard in my mother's studio while you were unconscious," he explained, sitting beside me on the chaise. "I didn't want Mrs. Winters to know of it yet." The box was simple but elegant, carved with lilies that matched the scent we had detected in the north wing. When the Duke opened it, I saw it contained several folded letters tied with a faded ribbon, a small vial of what appeared to be dried herbs, and a miniature portrait matching the one in the locket we had found. The unknown man who was not the late Duke. I believe this man may be the key to understanding what happened to my mother, the Duke said quietly, removing the miniature, and perhaps to all the Thornfield brides. Who do you think he is? I asked, leaning closer to examine the painted face. The Duke's proximity was distracting, the heat of his body so near to mine, awakening memories I had tried to bury beneath years of practiced indifference. I forced myself to focus on the mystery at hand, not on the way his breath stirred the loose strands of hair at my temple. I have a theory, he replied, his voice dropping lower. But first, I must show you something else. He reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew a folded paper. When he opened it, I saw it was a page torn from the journal he had shown me earlier, the one belonging to Beatrice, the first Duchess. I translated this passage from the original Italian, he explained. Beatrice was from Florence, like the family you worked for. The connection sent a chill through me. Was it mere coincidence that I had spent my decade of exile in the same city that had been home to the first victim of the Thornfield curse? I took the paper from him, our fingers brushing momentarily, and read the translated text. He watches me constantly now, his eyes following my every movement. I have found the letters he keeps hidden, and I know the truth about the experiments in the lower chambers. What he has done is against God and nature itself. I have written to Professor L for help, but I fear the letter will never leave Ravenscroft. If anything should happen to me, let it be known that it was not the curse that took my life, but the man who claimed to love me. I looked up at the Duke, my heart pounding. She knew she was in danger. She tried to get help. Yes, he agreed grimly, and I believe every duchess since, including my mother, discovered the same terrible secret and met the same fate for their knowledge. I studied the miniature portrait again, an idea forming. Could this be Professor L, the man Beatrice was trying to contact? The Duke nodded. I believe so, and I think I know who he was, Lorenzo Vincenti, a renowned Italian physician and natural philosopher of that era. His theories on life and death were considered scandalous by the Church. Life and death, I echoed, the words from the journal returning to me. The experiments in the lower chambers, against God and nature itself. The Duke's eyes met mine, and I saw in them a terrible certainty. My ancestors were trying to conquer death, Eleanor, and I believe they succeeded, at a horrific cost. Before I could respond, a soft knock at the door interrupted us. The Duke quickly returned the box and its contents to his desk before calling, "Enter." It was Jenny, the maid, her young face pale and frightened. "Begging your pardon, your grace, my lady, but Mr. Collins says there's been a disturbance at the family crypt. Someone's broken in and— Speak plainly, girl," the Duke commanded, though not unkindly. Jenny swallowed hard. "The late Duchess's coffin has been opened, sir, and her body is missing." I felt the blood drain from my face. The Duke stood abruptly, his expression hardening into a mask of controlled fury. "Have Mr. Collins meet me at the crypt immediately," he ordered, "and send word to Inspector Hargreaves in the village. This has gone beyond ghostly manifestations. This is desecration, and must be investigated as such." After the maid hurried away, the Duke turned to me. "Eleanor, I think it would be best if you remained here." I rose to my feet, steadier now. "If you think I came all this way only to sit by the fire while you face this alone, then you have indeed forgotten me, your grace." A brief battle played out across his features, concern warring with respect for my autonomy. The same conflict that had characterized so much of our previous relationship. Finally, he nodded. "Very well, but stay close to me." As we prepared to leave, I noticed he slipped the miniature of Professor Vincenti into his pocket. He caught my questioning look. "Something tells me we should keep this close," he explained. "If someone has gone to the trouble of desecrating my mother's grave, they may also be searching for whatever secrets she took with her." We made our way through the darkened house and out into the grounds. The night had grown colder still, and mist curled around our ankles as we followed the path to the Thornfield family crypt, a small Gothic structure on a hill overlooking the estate. Mr. Collins, a grizzled man with a weather-beaten face, waited at the entrance with a lantern. "Inside, your grace," he said gravely. "I've touched nothing, as you'd want." The ancient iron door of the crypt stood open, the lock clearly forced. The Duke took the lantern from Collins and motioned for me to stay behind him as we entered the chilly stone chamber. The air inside was heavy with the scent of decay and something else, a chemical odor I couldn't identify. The crypt contained generations of Thornfields, their final resting places marked by stone effigies and marble plaques. At the far end, a more recent tomb stood open, its heavy lid somehow pushed aside despite what must have been its tremendous weight. I knew without being told that it belonged to the Duke's mother. As the Duke raised the lantern, I saw that the coffin within was indeed empty, the silk lining torn and disturbed. But what drew my attention was not the absence of the Duchess's remains, but what had been left in their place. A small leather-bound book, its cover stained with what appeared to be blood. The Duke handed me the lantern and reached for the book with a handkerchief, careful not to touch it directly. As he opened it, a slip of paper fell out, landing at my feet. I bent to retrieve it, holding it to the light. It was a note, written in a spidery hand I did not recognize. The cycle continues. The bride must die for the Duke to live. As it was with the father, so it shall be with the son. The Duke read it over my shoulder, his breath catching. "What does it mean?" I whispered, though I feared I already knew. Before he could answer, the unmistakable crack of a pistol shot echoed from the direction of the house, followed by a woman's scream. Mrs. Winters this time. I was certain of it. "They're in the house," the Duke said urgently, already moving toward the crypt entrance. "Whoever is behind this, they're no ghost. They're very much alive and in my home." I hurried after him, the forgotten book still clutched in his hand, the note in mine. As we emerged from the crypt, I saw lights moving in the windows of Ravenscroft's north wing, the sealed wing that should have been empty and dark. And in one window, clearly silhouetted against the light within, stood the unmistakable figure of a woman in an old-fashioned gown, her long hair loose about her shoulders. "It cannot be," the Duke whispered beside me, his voice strangled with emotion. "Mother?" But even as he spoke her title, the figure turned to look down at us, and despite the distance, I could see that her face was not that of the Duchess, whose portrait hung in the grand hall. It was my own face looking back at me. For one impossible moment, I stood frozen, staring up at my own face in the window of the north wing. Then the figure disappeared, the light extinguishing as suddenly as it had appeared. Another gunshot rang out, followed by the sound of breaking glass. "We must hurry," the Duke said, grasping my arm as we ran toward the house. The night air burned in my lungs, and my skirts tangled around my ankles, threatening to trip me with each step. I had never felt such a bewildering mixture of terror and determination. Terror at what we might find. Determination to uncover the truth that had haunted Ravenscroft for generations. We entered through the kitchen, finding it deserted. A pot of soup still bubbled on the stove, abandoned in haste. The Duke snatched a poker from beside the hearth, offering me a carving knife from the butcher's block. I took it without hesitation, though the weight of it felt foreign in my hand. "Stay behind me," he whispered, as we crept toward the servants' staircase, the quickest route to the upper floors. But I knew this house almost as well as he did. I had spent nearly a year here before our abrupt parting, learning its secrets, loving its master. "Mrs. Winters?" the Duke called as we emerged onto the main floor. "Collins, Jenny." Only silence answered him. We moved through the great hall, our footsteps echoing on the marble floor. The ancestral portraits seemed to watch us with renewed interest, their painted eyes following our progress. I had always found them unsettling, but now they seemed almost sentient, as if the spirits of the Thornfield's past had awakened within their frames. A muffled thump from above drew our attention to the grand staircase. The Duke moved toward it, then hesitated, turning back to me. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low and urgent. "If anything should happen." He reached into his waistcoat pocket and pressed something cold and metallic into my palm. I looked down to see a small, silver key. "The southeast tower has a hidden room. This unlocks it. If we are separated, go there and wait for me. If I do not come by dawn—" He couldn't finish the thought. I closed my fingers around the key, our hands lingering together. "Nothing will happen," I said, with more confidence than I felt. "We will face this together, as we should have faced everything." The words hung between us, heavy with the weight of our shared past. For a moment, I thought he might speak of it, might finally explain why he had truly sent me away 10 years ago. But another crash from above broke the moment. We ascended the staircase cautiously, the Duke leading the way. The upper hall was dark, the gas lamps extinguished. By the faint moonlight streaming through the windows, I could see that the door to the north wing stood ajar once more, a thin line of unnatural blue light outlining it. "It should have been locked," the Duke murmured. "Perhaps our intruder has a key," I suggested, "or lockpicking skills." He glanced at me, a shadow of his old smile briefly crossing his face. "Always the rational explanation, Eleanor?" "Until proven otherwise," I replied, though my certainty in rational explanations had been severely tested since my return to Ravenscroft. We approached the door to the north wing, the Duke raising the poker defensively as he pushed it open wider with his foot. The corridor beyond was bathed in that same eerie blue light, though no source was visible. The temperature dropped noticeably as we crossed the threshold. "We should check your mother's studio first," I whispered. "That's where we saw the light from outside." The Duke nodded grimly, his jaw set in a hard line. We moved down the corridor, the floorboards no longer creaking beneath our weight, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The door to the studio stood open, blue light spilling from within. What we saw inside stopped us both in our tracks. The paintings we had discovered earlier were arranged in a circle on the floor, each canvas facing inward toward a central point where a curious apparatus had been set up, a contraption of brass, glass, and what appeared to be clockwork, connected to a series of glass vials containing luminescent blue liquid. It was this liquid that provided the ghostly illumination, and kneeling beside the device, her back to us, was a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her dark hair falling loose down her back. She was making adjustments to the machinery, her movements precise and practiced. "Mother?" the Duke whispered, his voice breaking on the word. The woman stilled, but did not turn around. "Not quite," she said, her voice oddly familiar, yet strange. And then I realized with a jolt that it sounded like my own voice, but distorted, as if heard through water. When she finally rose and faced us, I felt the knife nearly slip from my nerveless fingers. It was my face I was looking at, but older, lined with years I had not yet lived, eyes haunted by experiences I had not yet endured. A thin scar ran from her temple to her jaw on the right side, and her hair, though the same shade as mine, was streaked with silver. "Who are you?" the Duke demanded, his voice steadier than I expected, given the impossibility before us. The woman, my doppelganger, smiled sadly. "I am Eleanor Blackwood, Duchess of Thornfield. Or I was in another time." I felt the room tilt around me, but I forced myself to remain standing. "That's not possible," I said. "Many things at Ravenscroft are not possible, yet they exist nonetheless," she replied. Her gaze moved to the Duke, softening with an emotion I recognized all too well. Love mingled with unbearable grief. "You look so like him, Edmund, but younger than when I lost him." The Duke, Edmund, took a step forward, the poker lowering slightly. "You claim to be Eleanor from the future?" "A future," she corrected. "One I have come to prevent." A noise from the doorway made us all turn. Mrs. Winters stood there, a pistol in her trembling hand pointed directly at my double. Blood stained the housekeeper's sleeve, explaining one of the gunshots we had heard. "Stay back, Your Grace," Mrs. Winters warned. "This creature is not what it appears to be. It's a trick, part of the curse." "Put the gun down, Agnes," my doppelganger said calmly. "You've been loyal to the Thornfields for 40 years. You wouldn't want to accidentally harm the Duke." Mrs. Winters's eyes widened at the use of her Christian name, something I had never known until this moment. "How do you—" "I know many things," the older Eleanor interrupted. "I know that you were in love with the old Duke, Edmund's father. I know that you helped cover up the truth about the Duchess's death because you believed you were protecting the family. And I know that you still keep the old laboratory in the cellars prepared, just as your predecessor taught you." The housekeeper's face had gone ashen. "You cannot know these things, but I do. Just as I know that in 2 days' time, unless we change the course of events, Edmund will be dead and I will be taking his place in the family crypt." The Duke moved to stand between Mrs. Winters' gun and my double. "Put it down, Mrs. Winters. I wish to hear what she has to say." After a moment of hesitation, the housekeeper lowered the pistol. "The others are locked in the wine cellar, Your Grace. This woman overpowered us when we discovered her in the house." "They're unharmed," my double assured us. I needed time alone to complete the preparations. She gestured to the strange apparatus on the floor. "What is that device?" I asked, finding my voice at last. "A creation of Professor Lorenzo Vincenti," she replied, confirming our earlier suspicions. "The culmination of his work on transcending the boundaries between life and death and between moments in time." The Duke's eyes narrowed. "The experiments mentioned in Beatrice's journal." "Yes, your ancestors didn't merely want to conquer death, Edmund. They wanted to master time itself." My double turned her attention fully to me now. "You've already found some of the evidence. The journal, the portraits in this room. But you haven't discovered the laboratory below the East Wing yet, have you? The place where each Duke of Thornfield has continued the work in secret, passing it from father to son." I looked at the Duke, searching his face for any sign that he had known of this, that he had been keeping such a monstrous secret. The genuine shock and horror I saw there reassured me. "My father never spoke of any laboratory," he said. "If such experiments were conducted at Ravenscroft, I knew nothing of them. Because your father died before he could initiate you into the family secret," my double explained. "He was the first to break the chain in 300 years, and in doing so, he unknowingly saved you from becoming what every duke before you had become, a murderer of his own wife." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. I found myself moving closer to the Duke instinctively, unable to believe him capable of such evil, no matter what his ancestors might have done. "Explain yourself," the Duke commanded, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. My older self sighed, suddenly looking exhausted. "The Thornfield men discovered, through Vincenti's work, that the life force of a loving spouse, particularly at the moment of betrayal and death, could be harnessed to extend their own lives and even, in rare cases, to move backward in time to correct mistakes. Each Duke murdered his wife when his own mortality began to press upon him, using her death to rejuvenate himself." "That's monstrous," I whispered. "And you expect me to believe that Edmund—" "No," she cut me off. "Edmund is the exception. Because his father died before passing on the secret, he never learned the technique. Instead of murdering me as tradition dictated, he sent me away to protect me from what he sensed but could not understand. The curse that wasn't a curse at all, but a deliberate pattern of sacrifice." The Duke's face had gone pale. "But then, my mother, murdered by your father when he began to age too rapidly," my double confirmed gently, "as was every duchess before her. The portraits in this room were not painted by your mother, Edmund, but by your father. Studies of his victim and those of his ancestors, a grotesque family album. If what you say is true," the Duke said slowly, "then why have you come back? What happens in your future that you wish to prevent?" A shadow crossed the older Eleanor's face. "2 days from now, the last living Thornfield cousin, your father's nephew Richard, will come to Ravenscroft. He has discovered the family secret through old papers left by his own father. Unlike you, he embraces the dark legacy. He will attempt to murder me, and when you try to stop him, he will kill you instead." Her voice broke slightly. "I lived on for 20 years, alone with my grief and the knowledge of the Thornfield secret, until I found Vincenti's final work hidden in the laboratory, the means to travel back and prevent it all." "And the missing body of the Duchess?" I asked. "The locket? The warnings?" "Necessary steps to bring you both to the truth quickly," she replied. "I needed you to discover enough to believe me when I revealed myself. The Duchess's remains are safe. I've hidden them where they can be properly reburied once this is finished." She gestured to the apparatus on the floor. "This device has enough power for one more use. I've come to give you the choice I never had. Knowledge before it's too late." The Duke looked at the strange machine, then back at my older self. "What would you have us do? Cousin Richard arrives tomorrow evening. You can confront him with what you know, involve the authorities. Or," she hesitated, "or you can use this device to send yourselves back to the beginning, to when Edmund first sent Eleanor away. You can leave Ravenscroft together, destroy all record of Vincenti's work, ensure the secret dies with this generation." I felt the Duke's eyes on me, but I couldn't look away from my older self. You would cease to exist, I said, understanding suddenly. Your timeline, your memories, everything you've lived through would vanish. She smiled sadly. A small price to pay to save him, to give us the life we should have had. She reached out, her fingers stopping just short of touching my face. I have lived 20 years without him. I would erase myself 100 times over to give you both a chance at happiness. A clock somewhere in the house struck midnight, the sound echoing through the empty corridors. You must decide before dawn, my older self said. The alignment will be lost after that, and with it, your chance to change what comes. The Duke turned to me, his eyes filled with a question he seemed afraid to ask. I knew then that whatever choice we made, we would make it together, as we should have faced everything all those years ago. I need to show you something first, he said quietly. Something I should have shown you 10 years ago. He turned to Mrs. Winters. Release the servants and have them prepare rooms for the night. Lady Eleanor and I have much to discuss before morning. As we left the studio, I glanced back one last time at my older self. She stood amid the circle of paintings, the blue light casting her in an ethereal glow. In her eyes I saw a desperate hope that I would choose differently than she had, and the love for the Duke that time and tragedy had never dimmed. Whatever secret he was about to reveal, whatever choice lay before us, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. Some loves transcend time itself, defying even death to find their rightful conclusion. The Duke led me not to the library or his study, but to a part of Ravenscroft I had never entered. A small door beneath the main staircase, concealed behind a tapestry depicting a medieval hunt. He withdrew a key from around his neck, unlocked the door, and retrieved an oil lamp from a nearby table. My father forbade me from ever entering this place as a child, he explained as we descended a narrow spiral staircase. The stone steps were worn in the center from centuries of use. After his death, I discovered this key among his personal effects, but never found the courage to use it until recently. The air grew colder and damper as we descended, the walls glistening with moisture. The staircase seemed to go on forever, taking us deep beneath the foundations of Ravenscroft. Finally, we reached a small landing with an iron-bound door. The Duke hesitated, his hand on the latch. What I am about to show you, he said quietly, is the reason I sent you away 10 years ago. Not the full truth. I didn't discover that until your other self revealed it tonight, but enough that I feared for your safety, for your life. My heart pounded painfully in my chest. Whatever it is, Edmund, I can bear it. He pushed open the door, raising the lamp high. The chamber beyond was larger than I expected, its vaulted ceiling disappearing into shadows above. The walls were lined with shelves containing hundreds of leather-bound volumes, glass jars filled with unidentifiable specimens, and instruments whose purpose I could not begin to guess. At the center stood a large stone table, its surface stained dark, with leather restraints at its corners. Beside it was an apparatus similar to the one we had seen in the studio, but larger and more elaborate. The Thornfield laboratory, I whispered, taking it all in. The room felt ancient, yet somehow timeless, as if the usual rules of decay did not apply here. Yes, the Duke confirmed grimly. I found it a month after my father's death. There was a journal. He moved to a desk in the corner and retrieved a thick book bound in black leather. His records of the experiments. I could make little sense of them at first. The technical language was beyond my understanding. But I grasped enough to know that something unnatural had occurred here for generations. He opened the journal to a marked page and handed it to me. The handwriting was tight and precise, the ink brown with age. I read. Subject 6 responded most favorably to the extraction process, her connection to me being the strongest of all candidates, the life essence transferred with minimal loss. Estimated rejuvenation, 15 years. Side effects include occasional manifestation of her likeness in reflective surfaces and a persistent scent of her perfume. Will monitor for further phenomena. The ability to glimpse possible futures has increased substantially. Have seen E in danger. Must take steps. I looked up at the Duke, horror washing over me. E. Eleanor? He saw me in danger? The Duke took back the journal, his expression grim. I believe my father experienced visions of the future, a side effect of the life extension process. He saw you, saw us together, and saw something that frightened him enough to warn me against marriage before he died. He closed the book carefully. His last words to me were, "The bride must never come to Ravenscroft." At the time, I thought it merely the rambling of a dying man. When I met you 2 years later, I had all but forgotten it. "But then you remembered," I said softly, understanding dawning. "When we became engaged." He nodded, pain evident in every line of his face. As our wedding day approached, strange things began to happen. I found this laboratory. I began having dreams, vivid dreams of you dead on our wedding night, strangled by hands I couldn't see. I convinced myself it was the curse at work, that by marrying you, I would doom you to the fate of every Thornfield bride. "So you sent me away," I concluded, the old hurt rising in my chest even as I understood his motivation. "Without explanation, without trust. I thought I was protecting you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "What I did not understand, what I couldn't have known without what we've learned tonight, was that I was never the danger to you. Having never been initiated into the family secret, I posed no threat. But my father's warning made sense now. He knew that if you came to Ravenscroft as my bride, you would eventually discover the truth about the Thornfield men, and that knowledge would put you in peril from those who wished to preserve the secret. Your cousin Richard," I murmured. "He knew?" "His father was my father's brother, and clearly part of the conspiracy," the Duke confirmed. "When I sent you the letter asking you to return, I had no idea I was setting events in motion that would lead to both our deaths. I only knew that the dreams had returned, more vivid than ever, and that I needed your help to understand what was happening at Ravenscroft." I moved around the laboratory, taking in the evidence of centuries of terrible experiments. A row of small portraits on one wall caught my eye. Miniatures of women, each labeled with a name and date. The Thornfield brides, I realized. Their faces were diverse in features, but similar in one respect. Each wore an expression of trust and love, painted before they knew the fate that awaited them. "What did you hope I could do?" I asked, turning back to the Duke. "After 10 years of silence, why summon me now?" He moved closer, the lamplight casting half his face in shadow. "Because in all my searching, all my research, I found only one account of a Thornfield bride who escaped her fate, Beatrice, the first Duchess. The journal we found in the crypt mentions her survival against all odds. But my older self said Beatrice was murdered," I said, confusion creasing my brow. "The attempt was made," the Duke clarified, "but according to this account, it failed because Beatrice had discovered the truth and taken precautions. She escaped, disappeared from history. I thought if anyone could help me understand how she managed it, it would be you, the woman who never feared the Thornfield curse, who looked at superstition with clear eyes and a rational mind." A smile touched my lips despite the gravity of our situation. "You remembered that about me?" His eyes softened. "Eleanor, I remembered everything about you. Every day of these 10 years, I have carried your memory like a talisman against the darkness of this place." The raw honesty in his voice stripped away years of practiced indifference. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, to catch the familiar scent of him that had haunted my dreams. "We have a choice to make," I said quietly. "Confront your cousin when he arrives tomorrow, or use the device to return to the past and leave Ravenscroft forever." The Duke set the lamp on the stone table, its light creating a small circle of warmth in the ancient chamber. "What would you choose, Eleanor? If it were solely your decision to make?" I considered the question carefully, weighing all we had learned. The scientist in me says we should stay, gather evidence of these crimes, bring your cousin to justice, and expose the terrible secret of the Thornfield men once and for all. I paused, my heart racing. But the woman in me, the woman who has loved you for over a decade despite everything, says we should go back, leave this cursed place behind, and claim the life that was stolen from us. The Duke's eyes never left mine. "And which voice is stronger?" "They are equally matched," I admitted, "which is why the decision must be ours together. What do you wish, Edmund?" He was silent for a long moment, his gaze traveling around the laboratory, taking in the evidence of his family's dark legacy. For 300 years, the Thornfield men have committed unspeakable crimes in the name of extending their own lives. They have murdered the women who loved them, twisted nature itself to serve their selfish desires. His voice hardened. I want it to end, completely and finally. Then we stay, I said, reading his decision in his eyes. We gather evidence tonight, contact Inspector Hargreaves in the morning, and prepare for your cousin's arrival tomorrow evening. But the Duke shook his head slowly. No, Eleanor. We go back. I stared at him in surprise. But you just said... I want it to end, he repeated. And the surest way to end it is to ensure it never begins. If we return to 10 years ago and leave Ravenscroft immediately, taking with us or destroying all of Vincenti's research, the chain will be broken. No future Thornfield will discover these secrets. No more innocent women will die. Understanding dawned. You mean to abandon your title, your lands, everything? What is a title worth when it's soaked in the blood of innocent women? He asked simply. What are lands and wealth compared to a life with you, free from this tainted legacy? My heart swelled with love for this man who would sacrifice everything to break a cycle of evil he had never participated in. But where would we go? How would we live? A smile, a real smile, the first I had seen since my return, transformed his face. You once told me of your dream to travel the world, to study natural philosophy in the great centers of learning. We have the means to do that, Eleanor. My personal fortune is separate from the entailed estate. We could go anywhere, be anyone we choose. The possibility unfolded before me like a map to an undiscovered country, a life of freedom and discovery with the man I loved, unconstrained by the dark history of Ravenscroft. Yet a doubt lingered. But what of justice? I asked. The women who died, your mother, all the others, don't they deserve to have the truth known? Their murderers exposed? The Duke's expression sobered. In the timeline we would create, they would still be dead, their murderers beyond earthly justice. But by erasing the knowledge that led to their deaths, we prevent countless more victims in the future. He took my hands in his. It is an imperfect solution to a horror beyond fixing. But I believe it is the best chance we have to honor their memories, by ensuring it never happens again. I knew he was right. Looking into his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands around mine, I made my decision. Then we go back. Together. Relief and love mingled in his gaze. Together, he echoed, as we always should have been. We returned to the north wing, where my older self waited patiently beside the time apparatus, as if she had known what our choice would be. Perhaps she had. After all, she had once been me, had once stood where I stood, faced the same decision. You've chosen to return, she said. It was not a question. Yes, the Duke confirmed. To 10 years ago, before I sent Eleanor away. We'll leave Ravenscroft immediately, taking all of Vincenti's research with us. My older self nodded, satisfaction in her eyes. I hoped you would choose this path. She began adjusting the dials on the device, the blue liquid in its glass tubes glowing more intensely. I've set the coordinates for the night before you broke the engagement. You'll arrive in the Duke's study, where you were having that last conversation before everything changed. I stepped forward, suddenly needing to know one thing before this strange woman, this other version of myself, disappeared forever. Were you happy with him? In the time you had? She looked up, her lined face softening with remembered joy. Deliriously so. Even knowing how it would end, I would choose those years with him again, without hesitation. Her eyes moved to the Duke. Love him fearlessly, younger self. Every moment is precious. The device began to hum, the blue light pulsing stronger. It's ready, my older self announced. You must both stand within the circle of paintings and keep physical contact with each other throughout the transition. We moved to the center of the arranged canvases. The Duke took both my hands in his, our fingers intertwining. My older self made a final adjustment to the machine. Is there nothing we can bring with us? The Duke asked suddenly. No proof to convince our younger selves if our memories of this night fade? My older self considered, then removed the locket from around her neck, the same one we had found in the Duchess's bedchamber. This should survive the transition. It's been through it once already. She pressed it into my hand. Now hurry. The alignment won't last much longer. The blue light grew blinding. the humming of the device increasing to a painful pitch. I felt the Duke's grip tighten on mine. "I love you, Eleanor," he said, his voice nearly lost in the rising sound. "I have always loved you." "And I you," I replied, clinging to him as the world began to dissolve around us. "Always and forever." The last thing I saw was my older self raising her hand in farewell, a smile of peace on her face as she began to fade from existence. Then everything was light and noise and the sensation of falling through endless space. I opened my eyes to find myself standing in the Duke's study at Ravenscroft, but a younger, brighter version than the one I had seen upon my return. Sunlight streamed through the windows. It was late afternoon, not night. Across from me stood Edmund, his face unlined, his hair without a trace of silver. He looked as he had 10 years ago, on the day before he had broken my heart. For a moment, we stared at each other in confusion. Then understanding dawned in his eyes at the same moment I felt it in my own mind. We remembered everything: the older Eleanor, the laboratory, the terrible truth about the Thornfield men. Against all odds, our memories had survived the transition. "It worked," he breathed, looking down at our still-joined hands in wonder. I opened my palm to reveal the locket, solid proof that our experience had been real. "We have a second chance." Edmund pulled me into his arms, holding me as if he would never let go again. "No more curses," he whispered against my hair. "No more fear. Just us, Eleanor, facing whatever comes together." Over his shoulder, I caught sight of our reflection in the window glass. Young again, full of promise, with the future stretching before us unwritten. But for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw another reflection superimposed over our own. An older couple, their faces lined but happy, hands clasped as they smiled in approval and farewell. Then they were gone, and only Edmund and I remained, free at last from the shadow of Ravenscroft Manor and the curse that had never really been a curse at all, but a darkness of human making that we had finally overcome through love, courage, and the determination to choose a different path. That evening, we left Ravenscroft forever, taking with us only what mattered: each other, and the promise of a future unclouded by the past. As our carriage passed through the wrought iron gates, I did not look back at the gray stone mansion fading into the mist. My gaze was fixed firmly forward, on the man whose hand held mine, and on the wide world waiting to be discovered by the former Duke of Thornfield and the woman who had never feared his curse, the only woman his heart could never forget. 3 months later, on a sunlit morning in Florence, I became his wife in a small private ceremony far from the shadows of Ravenscroft, and as he slipped a plain gold band onto my finger, no Thornfield heirlooms, no cursed jewels, I knew with absolute certainty that some loves truly do transcend time itself, finding their way home against all odds, breaking every curse with the simple, enduring power of 2 hearts that refuse to be separated. In the years that followed, we traveled the world together, studying natural philosophy, collecting botanical specimens in the Amazon, deciphering ancient texts in Egypt, and eventually establishing a small but respected scientific journal. We never spoke of Ravenscroft to others, never revealed the dark secret of the Thornfield men. That knowledge died with the timeline we had left behind, buried beneath the weight of a better future we built day by day, choice by choice. And if, occasionally, I dreamed of an older woman with my face and a scar along her cheek, smiling at me from across an impossible divide of time and fate, well, that was a small price to pay for the life we had claimed. A life without curses, without fear, a life of love that had defied time itself to find its rightful conclusion.